I'm Gerry and I'm actually chairman of Brooklyn's museum, and there's nothing better than having an interest in old cars when you are involved in a museum where historic cars are an absolutely important part of our existence. This car is a 1914 Talbot, made in Talbot in London, in Acton. And I'd always wanted to try Edwardian motoring before I got too old, and I bought it about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's certainly probably more of a challenge than I thought it would be, because old cars like this need plenty of time spent on them before you go out, for instance. But it's a lovely old friend. It's never let me down, and it's nice to be able to go and drive, and when you're driving this, there are never any cars in front of you. Plenty behind, but never any in front of you, so you always have a clear road. It's a 1914 Talbot. It's a 12 horsepower CBX, 4-cylinder, so about 2.5 litre. Very low revving, as you would expect. Uses rather a lot of petrol. Talbot, at the beginning of the First World War, stopped making cars for the private market because everything went into the war effort. But they did export quite a few running chassis radiators to Australia. And this is one of those that was exported to Australia as a running chassis, and then the Australians built the body on it. It's known as a piano back because the back looks a bit like the back of a piano, and it was in private ownership until the late 1920s, and then it went into a museum where it remained into the 1960s. It came out of the museum, and the owner of the museum sold it to his best friend, who then rebuilt it. It was driven around the States for a few years and then imported into the UK around the turn of the last century, and I acquired it about 7-8 years ago. So here you have the four cylinders with the water jackets on top. That's a modern cooling fan. That's coming off as soon as I have a chance. It has dual ignition. It drives on a magneto, but you start it on a coil. And so this is a rather complicated Bosch contraption, but it seems to work, which is the main thing. And this is one of the first cars that Talbot made to have electric lights on it. And I'm lucky to say that all the lights are the original lights, which does cause a bit of a worry if you park it in public car parks. Inside, there's not much to see inside. So inside, the instrumentation is typical of the time. The speedometer, bottom left. Then there is the oil pressure gauge on the next gauge on the left, and the gauge on the right is the pressure gauge for the fuel system. But actually I've cheated. I have an electric fuel pump on it, just to be a little more practical. Moving to the steering wheel, the usual hand throttle on the right, and the advanced retard for the ignition on the left. As you can see, it's a two-seater. Other than that, it's just a lovely little car, lovely little runner. Top speed, I don't know. It's pretty terrifying at 45 miles an hour. If it's dry weather and you try and slam on the brakes, it'll hop like a kangaroo. If you are driving in the wet and you slam on the brakes, it'll just slide. In neither case will it come to a stop quickly, because it only has brakes on the rear wheels. But they're pretty big brakes. The only problem is people sometimes tend to cut in front of you, and that is a little bit scary in modern traffic, because, as I said, you can't stop. But lovely little car.